Well, welcome to this edition of the Yahowah blog. I'm your host, Craig Winn. We're here in the library studio with Wookie, who just had his fill of green tea. We're returning to an amazing prophecy, one that I had decided to examine because I wanted to demonstrate that when the prophet Yashayah and Moshe spoke of the Shabuwah harvest, that he was discussing the ingathering of souls, and that the people who were gathered in would be so few and so disconnected from the power structure of society, from religion and politics, that for the most part, they wouldn't be missed. Well, that's all there, and it is profoundly important, and we're working up to that statement as we make our way through the 56th chapter of Isaiah, Yashayah. What else we found is riveting. Some of the most specific, pertinent, interesting prophecies we have ever read. And so with Wookie here doing his best to steal the camera, mugging for the camera there, pal, we will continue. It says that those who are acting like Wookiees, who are pretending to be watchmen, who were assigned as lookouts, well, unlike the Wookiee, they're blind. All of them are ignorant, and they are opposed to Yada. They lack understanding. They are without revelation. They are unaware, unable to teach, and therefore they're clueless. They are not Yada. They are universally contemptible, rife with emotion, akin to dumb dogs, incapable of intelligent speech, while they are without the capacity to understand or the ability to prevail. And they will not succeed, as they are utterly incompetent, unable even to mark intelligently, panting while dreaming and thus hallucinating, lying about and around, smitten with their inactivity and lack of awareness. And so these overly emotional whores and malcontents have an intensely fierce soul, stubborn and self-willed. They will never acknowledge that they have gone too far, never admitting that they are gluttonous and unrestrained, as they are insatiable, never able to be satisfied. Those acting as if they were shepherds, clamoring for authorization, wanting to write themselves into the story, to lead and to feed the flock, are not Yada. Because they are ignorant, because they are irrational, they're devoid of understanding, neither perceiving nor comprehending, and thus lacking the capacity to make intelligent connections, which is how we come to understand. All of them have turned to their own way, every person after their ill-gotten gain and dishonest advantage, acting as if they were thieves, without exception or restraint, and to the very end, even to their demise. Yashayah 56, 10 and 11. You know, when we just read this, and if you didn't know what was following, where God's going to be very exacting as to who this is being ascribed to, you would say, well, it might fit a number of different people. There have been lots of people throughout time who have claimed to be watchmen who are actually blind. They have no idea what's happening around them. The rabbis of the first century, when Dode returned to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Makurim, would be described as such. And it says that all of them are just ignorant and they're opposed to Yada. And if you were not to deal with Yada in this statement and in the next, you might be of the contention that, well, there's lots of people who have been ignorant and irrational. Look around X today, and you will find a plethora of them. But the fact that this was written so as to say they are actually opposed to Yada really does narrow in on a certain contingency of malcontent individuals. Now, it says here that they are just universally contemptible. They're rife with emotion. They're akin to dumb dogs. They're incapable of intelligent speech. This is, again, pervasive amongst the anti-Semites, the Christians, the Muslims, and the MAGAs, as well as the Marxists on social media. So we do see a lot of this, and it may have been meant here to be very widespread. And it says here they just completely lack the capacity to understand. That's my view. I've become more and more accommodating of idiots posting, particularly on Facebook, because they do such a marvelous job of exposing really how utterly incompetent and irrational, ignorant they are. And so it's entertaining. They don't even know how to bark intelligently. They're hallucinating all the time, smitten with their own sense of worth when they're not only insatiable, but they're totally and completely unconstrained. God says that, they are emotional whores. They're fierce, mean-spirited, stubborn, self-willed, never, ever acknowledging their wrong. Boy, if we ever see that in both religious and political communities. Today when we're in the aftermath of Trump invading Venezuela, capturing their leader and hauling him off to New York and saying that he now runs Venezuela, stealing their oil and silver. And you hear all those people that are parenting this great thing as a victory and pounding their chests, and you just say, when did the world become this grossly immoral? That kidnapping, that thievery, that aggression against another nation is celebrated. It's something we see, though, on and on again throughout social media, and I know it's exceedingly pervasive in society apart from that today. But of course, it is also pervasive amongst this rebellious group of malcontents that claim to be speaking for a mother God. And that's the group that Yahowah is going to zero in on momentarily. And they're the ones who are pretending that they're acting as shepherds. They're clamoring to find themselves authorized. They were driven to find themselves written somewhere in God's story. They wanted to be Yada, but God says, you're not Yada, which again zeroes in on a particularly cantankerous group of misguided characters. And when you read what they write, it's obvious they have no capacity to make intelligent connections, and they're damn near dumb as stones. And God's saying, they all turn their own way. They're after their own ill-gotten gain. They're trying to make things out for their advantages. They're acting like crooks and thieves, and there is no restraint, and they're going to continue to be belligerent right to their demise. I would say that prior to the Mother Goddess Rebellion last year, and previous to returning to Yashayah 56 and 57 to validate the nature of the Shabuwah harvest, this malevolent clique has been trying to misappropriate everything that I have learned and shared as Yada over these past 20 to 24 years. And I have perceived this rebuke as a genuine criticism of those who are lost, who have returned to their conspiratorial past. Now, especially cognizant of what follows in the next chapter of Yashayah, where God is absolutely explicit, where there is no question as to who he is talking about. and the utter irrationality of those trying to undermine Yahweh's Nakar, I realized that this is specific to a particularly dumb and blind contingency of ignorant women. So I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I have read the entirety of God's rebuke. And they have foolishly presented themselves as if they were enlightened, as if they were moral, as if they were beacons of brilliance and watchmen of sorts. But they are so desperate to be Yada that they malign the one who earned that distinction with Yahweh long ago. All the while, the more they protest and post, the more apparent it becomes that they lack the capacity to understand much of anything pursuant to God. They are, as Yahweh has and will continue to depict them, smitten with themselves because they're hallucinating. Well, they're largely psychotic, lacking genuine empathy. They are an overly emotional, reactionary, and thoughtless brood. And because they are so mean-spirited and vicious, and particularly self-willed, while recklessly stubborn, there is no appeasing them or satiating them. They are unrestrained. They are insatiable in their cravings, and their desire to be seen as credible, even moral, lusting to be perceived as if they were shepherds instead of wolves. And as much as their sole motivation is to replace me, they are as far from being Yada as were Paul, Akiba, and Muhammad. Even when their dubious and obvious failures to make intelligent connections are shared, explained, they show no capacity to learn or correct their mistakes. They made a post on turning Yahweh's name into Mother Goddess, and they made 3 citations from the Towrah to demonstrate their point. And I wrote a 125-page essay going right to the same passages that they quoted from and sharing all of it in context to prove overwhelmingly, irrefutably, that the very passages that they cited to justify their creation of a mother goddess and to turn God's name into a duality were packed with nothing but lies. And yet they learn nothing from it. They're incapable of learning. They're incapable of doing what one must do if you're going to earn God's trust. You need to know when you're wrong, correct, and move on from there. But they can't. They have turned to their own way, to their goddess mythology, seeking recognition. They have assured themselves that their only acknowledgments are going to be what follows: rebukes and condemnations. Not only did the queen of this goddess cult steal tens of thousands from me and other covenant members as well, they are currently misappropriating my translation style, which is exceedingly unique, my transliterations, which are also unique, all to pass themselves off as if they were me. But they're not Yada, according to God. It's so bad that their most repeated hashtag is my name, Craig Winn, followed by Yada and Yada Yahowah. Now, they can't prevail or attract an audience on their own nonsense. So what they do is they peddle my name. After 24 years of work, what can they steal from me and from God? It is thievery, just as Yahweh foretold, and it will result in a very bad outcome for them. Now, should you be of the impression that I'm making too much of a gaggle of goons, I'd normally be prone to concur. I see them as insignificant and wholly incongruent with God's testimony, ignorant and irrational. But since Yahweh sees them differently. Oh, sure, he sees them as ignorant. He sees them as irrational. He sees them as incongruent with his testimony. But this is the longest diatribe from God, the longest continuous condemnation of any individual found anywhere in the Torah and prophets, and it's directed at a singular woman. So God views the importance of rebuking her. And we're going to follow God's example, his lead, and go where his words lead. And we're going to pursue them to their natural conclusion, which is truly amazing. Something I never thought I would witness. There isn't and never has been anything like what is found at Yahowah.com or within the Yahowah series and the Yahowah blog. The unparalleled amplifications, these translations, these copious explanations, the illustrative commentary, and the many thousands upon thousands of unheralded insights reintroduce Yahweh's name, establish Dode as our Savior, explain the purpose of the Bereth covenant and the Moedim restoring witnesses, provide an accurate timeline of events, and renounce religion. They also, more importantly, direct all who visit to Yahowah. And from Yahweh's perspective and his viewpoint, that resonates throughout this portion of Yashayah. This message is not only essential at this time, there is only one through whom it is being correctly conveyed. Yahowah introduced this by saying, I am supporting, I am introducing you to, I will deliver my Tsadaq. He is Ha-Nakar, the observant foreigner. So God is all in when it comes to protecting and supporting the implement through whom he has chosen to work. Now, there are upwards of 1,000 prophecies which convey this same message. I am the one God has chosen and equipped to convey his testimony, announce his return, and reconcile the fractured family. And as this prophecy has already foretold, even pondering the possibility of this tree of knowledge withering and failing to produce fruit is wholly unacceptable to God. And so he is pulling the weeds. He's removing the toxins. Now, considering the broader implications, when we survey the totality of the abuse which has been directed towards Israel and Jews by nations and religions, the most menacing institution of all has actually been Judaism. It is the worst of a bad lot, and the worst of the worst are the Haredim, living as parasites while misrepresenting Yahowah, his Bereth, Towrah, and Ben's son. And if not for rabbis, of course, there would be no Christianity and no Islam to distort Yahowah's message. Now, while the rabbis will continue to conspire, they will soon come to regret what they've done, not because the casualties they have inflicted, they don't care about those lost Jewish souls, but because there will be recompense and they will pay. And especially humiliating for them, the goy they will come to despise is the one who is assigned to judging them. Now, fortunately for many, between now and then, there will be a harvest and a gleaning of the covenant children on Shabuwah and then another on Towrah. These will occur on either May 22nd, 2026, 136 days from now, or on June 11, 2027. And then during the evening of September 23rd, 2033. Not that the religious will notice. According to Yashayah, Rabbis will be scheming against the Almighty and their brethren right to the bitter end. This reads, should you agree to come? Or it says, you should agree to come. It's the order of the words is important, isn't it? You should agree to come, consenting to assemble together to change things around. I have decided to obtain and accept intoxication with the confusion and insobriety of wine. So we have chosen to habitually be inebriated, constantly consuming alcohol and other sundry liquors to the point of incapacitated judgment through these fermented libations. Therefore, it will be, and he will exist like this day tomorrow. If the days to come are opposed and delayed to a significant extent for the thousands of remnants. Wow. It's quite a conclusion there. So the testimony regarding inebriants doesn't say that they're alcoholics. What it says is they want to incapacitate judgment. And you do that by spewing toxic testimony. It is the consequence of religion, the consequence of conspiracy, and to a large degree, the consequence of politics. You spew toxic rhetoric, and you will incapacitate people's judgment. And so this is God saying that those who do so have chosen to do so. It is their desire to incapacitate people's ability to think, and that they're going to continue to spew such toxins and poisons. Therefore, it says here that their goal was for it to exist and him to be just as it is this day, also tomorrow. And they say if the days to come are opposed, and if they are delayed to a significant extent for thousands of remnants. Well, that's a diabolical ambition, I will tell you for sure. So this translation proved to be an interesting exercise in voice, pronouns, moods, and defining roots. This analysis begins by recognizing that this is presented as a quote to cite the mindset of the dishonest shepherds who were rebuked in the preceding statement. Their intent is to incapacitate the judgment of those they intend to beguile, literally intoxicating them with their debilitating rhetoric. They are knowingly peddling their delusions to the detriment of those they're confusing. In fact, by using the imperative and the cohortive moods, God is reporting that these malcontents have literally decided on their own initiative to be inebriating. In other words, to perpetrate a incapacitating fraud. And they expect their followers to capitulate. The most intriguing aspect of this comes from Makar, because it is a compound of ma to ponder the implications of a car, which is to delay, to defer, to hinder, and to cause many to hesitate and be left behind. In this context, this means that the mother goddess clique is committed to debilitating Yahweh's Ha-Nakar, observant foreigner, to such an extent that thousands of Yehudim and Goyim, who would otherwise benefit from these ingatherings, in addition to the final remnant of Israel to be purged of their guilt on Towrah, will Makar, hesitate, because their judgment will have been incapacitated. With the waters muddled and now toxic with embittered slander, many potential beneficiaries will be hindered according to God, with others delayed, such that they're left behind, unable to capitalize on God's gift and plan. And therein is the essence of this argument. That's why the mother goddess clique is so despised by God. Beyond this specific warning, the proceeding is also an admonition not to be swept up by the inertia of the normalcy syndrome. With all evidence to the contrary throughout history, and even with debilitating examples recently, people tend to believe that over the course of days, months, and years, that nothing much will change. They have been lulled into the opinion that tomorrow will be as today, but that is not the case, especially as we move into the time of Israel's troubles. Therefore, Yahweh is telling us that many obstacles will be tossed in the path of those who would otherwise benefit from Ha-Nakar, and more still will remain inebriated with incapacitated judgment, such that they are lured into a false sense of security. Fortunately, Yahweh is not playing a numbers game. He never has, he never will. He knows that the naysayers will continue to hold sway over the deluded masses who are now, less than 8 years away from drawing their last breath. With all evidence and reason having no effect on most of them, and being indifferent to the very word of God, the only rational option is for Yahweh to value quality over quantity. This brings us to the next chapter, which in the great Isaiah scroll isn't separated by so much as a punctuation mark, a period. One thought parlays into the next. Yahweh's outreach through Ha-Nakar, the observant foreigner, will continue to be directed at those willing to invest the time to be right about God, and who approach with an open and clear mind. The most devoted of these highly valued souls will soon vanish during the Shabuwah harvest. And when they are withdrawn to be with Yahweh on the Shabbat of May 22nd, 2026, at the very beginning of the time of Israel's troubles, or on the Shabbat of June 11th, 2027, as a horde of Muslims flood into Israel for the great jihad. According to God, hardly anyone will notice, although there will be one group of people embittered over it. Now, this is why we directed our attention to Yahweh's portrayal of the Asaph, this ingathering in Yashayah, Isaiah 57. A magnificent miracle of godly proportions is now inevitable, and it is imminent. Then the text reads, the right and the vindicated, Tsadaq, the correct and innocent, will vanish, disappearing, such that those who remain will not know where they have gone. Abad, their whereabouts becomes unknown as they go missing and appear to be lost, having been carried away at that moment. An actuality, call perfect. No one will give it any thought or meaningfully ponder the implications. But no one examines or questions this or takes it to heart. Loyal and devoted individuals, just said, people who are favored, loving, kind, and steadfast, will be harvested, gathered together, and taken away during the Asaph ingathering. They will be withdrawn, removed, and received. This is the nifl participle. That's an important distinction. We'll get to that in a moment. While no one makes the connection to comprehend why. A and bien, with no one cognizant of the reason nor understanding the implications. For indeed, away from the presence of this evil shepherding, this disastrous calamity caused by troublesome former compatriots and miserable companions who are wickedly wrong, those who are correct, upright, and innocent will be gathered in the harvest, removed and received. A cough be taken away, to be withdrawn, assembled and brought together during an ingathering, nifl, perfect, third person, masculine, singular, addressing Ha-Tsadaq, which is masculine, singular. Now, this statement and the one that follows is conclusive in affirming that the Asaph ingathering will be of human souls. And during the most prolific of these, which is the Shabuwah Katsar, those who are Tsadaq, write about Yahowah and his Towrah, teaching his Bereth covenant, and his Moedim, restoring witnesses, will be abad. They're going to vanish. They will abad. They will disappear such that those who remain will not know their whereabouts. Now, with the use of abad, we are also afforded an insight into the disposition of our physical bodies. Since it is often rendered perished and destroyed, this suggests that once our nephesh souls depart, our lifeless flesh will simply cease to exist. This is because we must shed our Basar bodies to participate in the Shabuwah harvest. A physical body cannot enter the fourth, fifth, or sixth dimensions en route to the seventh in Shamaim. When we are less, we are much, much more. Also interesting, abad was scribed in the call perfect, indicating that the Tsadaq, correct, will actually vanish at this point in time, with this transpiring with a definite beginning and a finite conclusion. There is no nuancing this result. The outcome is presented as real and not as a metaphor. Further, the fact that Tsadaq is masculine and realizing that abad was scribed in the third person masculine singular, this affirms that those who are correct are the ones who are going to be carried away and disappear. The key to participation is being Tsadaq, right, about God, about his covenant, about the Moedim, about his beloved Bakor, firstborn son. The reason Tsadaq is repeated is because it's the key to deliverance. Those who participate in this ingathering will all be right about their relationship. They will be correct regarding the covenant. They will be guiltless by having relied upon the mikre that Dode fulfilled. Sharing what we have learned in this regard, of course, is our purpose. It's why we're here. On a planet whose inhabitants are numbered above 8 billion human souls, with fewer than 1 in a million extracted on Shabuwah, the relatively few who are withdrawn will barely constitute a ripple in the ocean. Some will no doubt notice their disappearance, but in a world essentially devoid of analytical researchers and diligent journalists, few, if any, will ponder the implications. Souls are invisible to our eyes, in fact, to any technology we have devised, and even scientific detection methods can't ascertain what they are comprised. So as our bodies vanish and our souls depart, there's going to be nothing to see, nothing to report. News at 11. Nothing happened to nobody. We have no proof. They simply disappeared. By describing the ingathering as ish chesed, individuals who are loyal and steadfast, Yahowah is reinforcing something, well, that I didn't appreciate and certainly didn't recognize prior to December of 2024. You see, it was then that a dozen former associates, including my publicist, editor, webmaster, and media manager, all bolted to assuage their fragile egos and on behalf of a jealous and embittered woman who was at the time crying for attention, presenting herself as a victim when she was a victimizer. Now, prior to this, I had thought that once covenant, always so. But that isn't the case, not according to God. Yahowah is only willing to accept those that he can depend upon. It's a lesson that we learned in reassessing what occurred in Gan Eden and why God calls the fall of man. He wants us to demonstrate that we are loyal, we're devoted, we can be trusted. Eternity is a very long time, and God isn't interested in spending his nor taking the risk of those who are not responsible. He is reliable and steadfast, and so he naturally expects the same in us. This is the message of Gan Eden. It is why we're returning. We have another opportunity to get this right. As further evidence of this, well, consider Miriam. She was called a prophet, a prophetess, when she led the woman's chorus during the Song of the Sea after crossing the Gulf of Aqaba during the Exodus. But then she was berated by God. She was banished. She was stricken with leprosy, and she was subject to a final divorce, all for having challenged her brother and demeaned his wife, that brother being Moshe. Now, this connection between devious and conniving women, then and now, is one Yahowah does not want us to miss. That is why he has repeated the reference to the ongoing problem of ra'ah, of disastrous shepherds. Here, it is from their presence that those who are right are being harvested right before them on Shabuwah. We will be forever parting company with the Panei Ra'ah, the presence of this miserable and malignant contingent of toxic conspirators. While they are here and expecting to be gleaned or harvested, we are going to be taken and they're going to be left, and it's going to drive them crazy, according to God. This is one of the times where it becomes impossible to disjoin this rebuke from the mother goddess and her cult. Therefore, according to God, those who bailed on Yahowah and his children, with so much left to be accomplished, and then viciously turned against both, changing Yahowah's name while maligning the tree of knowledge, well, they're going to be excluded from the Shabuwah harvest. And they, as irrational and belligerent as they have become, will not comprehend why. They will be left as we are Asaph, brought together, removed, and received during this ingathering. However, they will not be alone, because the overtly political, conspiratorial, and religious prefer believing to reasoning. They prefer faith to facts. And as a result, they will remain clueless, which really is as it should be. They are not redeemable. Bien escapes them. And it is by bien, evidence and reason, that we come to know God or not at all. Now, as a result of this fracture and what I had wrongly perceived as family, Yahowah directed our attention back to the Garden of Eden, where Adam and Chawah also proved unworthy because they were unreliable. This is the reason that Yahowah caused the fall of man, only to give us the opportunity to demonstrate that we are both worth his attention, would listen, could be trusted, and were motivated to make an ongoing contribution to the relationship, and that we should be allowed back into the garden, following Towrah and Kippurim, to be given another chance. It is why the tree of knowledge exists. It's why the Towrah has been inspired to share his fruit. We will be afforded another 1,000 years under ideal circumstances to prepare the surviving mortal remnant to earn Yahowah's trust, so that he can equip and enable those who are worth the risk, such that they can journey off this planet with God and explore the universe with him. It's a very noble undertaking, is it not? Continuing to examine every nuance of God's timely message so that we get this right. Note that the phrase, "no one will consider the implications," was also written in the call perfect. This means that when the harvest transpires, we can be assured that in the aftermath of our departure, there will be no cogent response, at least at this time. Then it really gets interesting with a cough taken away during the harvest. It was scribed in the niphal participle. And as a result, we discover that those who will benefit from the ingathering will have contributed to their own highly favorable outcome through their diligence. You know, the niphal stem says that the subject not only participates in the action, but causes the outcome. And so it's a cause and effect sort of thing. That we cause it, we benefit from it. So God's saying it's not by random chance that some were taken and others were not. It's very much based upon our own willingness to make a meaningful contribution. It's kind of a neat idea, really, and that Yahowah was saying you'll earn it. And what could be better? I mean, it's, I guess, lovely that, God would say, I want to give you eternal life, and I want to rid you of all religious gunk and adopt you into my family and empower, enrich you. This is my gift to you. Yeah, nice. Thank you. Okay. It's like a rich father gives their son and daughter a Ferrari, and here's the keys, and I'm paying, and the father pays the insurance, the gas, provides the garage and everything else, and that the son or daughter contributes nada. And such cars have a tendency to last through most of the weekend. They're not valued. The kid doesn't wash them. The kid doesn't wax them. The kid doesn't maintain them. The kid doesn't drive them with a sense of respect and responsibility. But if you've worked for it and you've made a contribution, even if your dad picks up the majority of the cost, but you've made a tremendous contribution to it, and you're engaged in this process, then you have a sense of appreciation. That's what God wants. He wants everyone who is part of Forevermore to know they made a contribution to be there. Our sense of satisfaction, our sense of feeling we're part of this. We're all in this together. We have a sense of accomplishment. We know we've done something that pleased our God. All of this contributes to the idea of why this harvest was scribed in the niphal participle. Participle means that it's the process of this ingathering is not only highly demonstrable for those who are participating in it, but they are defined by it. So while Yahowah has answered the question we came to resolve, he's not done reinforcing his point. The Tsadaq, correct and vindicated, will vanish during the Asaph harvest because they remain chesed, loyal and devoted, and are favored for being steadfast. And they will be men, peneh, removed from the presence of the Ra'ah, this miserable time and malignant people. In addition, the mother goddesses, a world's cadre of religious clerics, political leaders, societal and social influencers, as well as those caught up in the nonsensical frenzy of posting away online, well, they will have and will continue to make a mess of things. They will have placed themselves and the planet in irreconcilable death spirals, either by their activity or their inactivity. If not for Yahweh's intervention on Towrah in year 6000 2033, Earth would become desolate. Since it's important, I want to affirm that the Ra'ah from which the right-minded and steadfast are being withdrawn are comprised of, malevolent malcontents. Ra'ah depicts the degradation of judgment and of leadership, such that many operate without morality. It predicts an inverted mindset where wrong is seen as right and bad is somehow considered good. This is suggestive that Yahowah is therefore familiar with Day on X, in addition to the toxic drivel that comes out of this clique that is so desirous of besmirching all that we have achieved. Now, as the Ra'ah rottenness festers and this malignancy metastasizes, there will be no point to the continued presence of the Tsadaq, of the Bereth, remaining on the earth at this very moment. Not only will the plethora of contrarian voices and adverse conditions be too caustic for us to be heard above their roar, for those who would otherwise listen, to become salvageable, they will have to hit rock bottom. And far few will consider the alternative to man prior to the point that they despair of hope. That was only going to transpire when they realized that a political or religious solution to this carnage they are witnessing and enduring just isn't possible. Sometimes we have to, even with children, allow them to hit rock bottom before they will seek help. God actually wants us to stumble so that we can prove we have the wherewithal to get back up. All the while, the earth will not be left without a voice or a witness, because our testimony will remain published at Yahowah throughout these books, presented at yadayah.com and streamed on the Yahowah blog. That's not going anywhere. Moreover, in due time, the witnesses will return in opposition to the religious and political, while we give voice to Yahowah's last call out of Babylon. Therefore, our removal during Shabuwah is really best for everyone. The residue will continue to fall to the point where a few, at least, will be willing to reject man and choose God. All the while, the Tsadaq will be given a well-earned respite, along with the opportunity to learn more, comprehensive education, so that we are prepared for the stretch run right to the finish line. Showing consistency, Yahowah reminds us that by using the nifl stem a second time as the concluding verb, that those who are Asaph, gathered in the harvest and withdrawn by him, will be received because, well, they contributed to this ingathering. We're also being reminded that Tsadaq, those who are vindicated, will be innocent, which means not guilty, because they will be right about God, which means that they are correct regarding Yahowah, his son, Dod, and they are capitalizing on all they have offered and achieved. The contrast between those taken and left during Shabuwah will become the ultimate expression of right versus wrong, devoted and compassionate as compared to malignant and maniacal, aware and engaged as opposed to oblivious and apathetic. This no. Are you prepared? Are you willing to be among the few advancing God's solution, or are you contributing to the problem as a counterproductive and damning influence? Lots of those, aren't there? As the earth plunges into darkness, swallowed in deceit, destruction, and death, Yahowah says to those contributing to and participating in this Asaph gathering that they will arrive, they will bow, they will come, and they will be included. Call imperfect, ongoing implications, very literal interpretation. Reconciled and restored, in act, intact and healthy, satisfied and content, blessed and prosperous, in favorable circumstances and saved. Shalom, completely safe and sound. God wants us to know that just because the others don't know where we have gone, that where we are going is going to be shalom. Satisfying. Favorable. They will be spiritually restored and comfortably settled within his restful environs, moving about and walking around while conducting their lives in a manner which is right, honest, fitting, and proper, truthful, sincere, appropriate, justified, and honorable. Yashayah, Isaiah 57:2. Shabuwah shalom. Akaf shalom. The Tsadaq will bow. The right will come and find shalom, tranquility. From a planet rife with rotten, we will take the ride of a lifetime to shalom, tranquility. Yahowah is withdrawing his covenant contributors from the rot of man, whereby God's son and daughters will enjoy the most satisfying circumstances imaginable. Shamaim will be to our liking. We have God's promise on it. Reconciliation and renewal await those who are being received. Now, I've always perceived heaven as a place where we're up, we're active, and that's being reinforced here by halak, moving about. And since our inclusion will be predicated upon being Tsadaq, right, it is to be expected that Shamaim, this spiritual realm, will accommodate those that are nakok, fitting and proper. It is my hope, and indeed God's expectation, that those who invest the time to read these volumes of Yahowah, know about what is going to befall this planet, recognize who God is, what he's offering, what he's expecting in return. That those who do this are going to be vindicated. And we're going to exit this planet together such that we do not have to endure what those who remain will experience. And it's going to be nasty out there. There will be pestilence and there will be war, natural disasters, and human malfeasance, runaway inflation, and economic collapse. All while the world promotes its favorite conspiracy. Blame the Jews. Specifically addressing the clique of malcontent conspiratorialists who sought to claim that this Shabuwah harvest was theirs, that it belonged to them. The voice of the mother goddess is so shrill on this point, all while disparaging Yada, now Dode, even Yahowah, and transforming the Ruach, condemning the 35 books that are part of Yahowah, all under false pretenses. We find God outing and lambasting them. But as for all of you, those of you who are still present, wanting to approach, very important is how this was written, Karab. You who want to draw near by presenting your case, call imperative second person plural active, which means this is what they are opining for. This is what they crave. At this time, you are the children of false pretenses. You're under the spell of an Anan, a demonic woman, deliberately conjuring a false spirit to obscure reality and to blow smoke as a sorceress. Benny Anan. You are the offspring of a female who is genuinely and intensely committed to pursuing a demonic spirit to actually occlude observation through sleight of hand and fortune telling. Poel, peel, call, participle, feminine, singular, active, and absolute as the seed, the offspring, the product of Naaf, the adulterous one who is unfaithful, disloyal, unreliable, indeed religious. The ones soliciting lovers by way of idolatry and the veneration of false gods and spirits. This one is peel, participle, singular, masculine, absolute and active. And the Zana, the despised whore, the loathed woman, prostituting her despicable nature by pandering to her partners for favors, bribes. The shunned and scorned harlot, and the immoral prostitute who feigns love for adulation and money. Doing so consistently. Call imperfect, third person, feminine, singular, active. Yashayah, Isaiah 57:3. One of the most intriguing, pertinent, important prophecies ever issued. Yahweh's assessment is directed specifically towards those who are both Ra'ah, acting like evil shepherds, and troublesome compatriots who are wickedly wrong, and those who are trying to ascertain why others were taken when they were left behind during Shabuwah. We know this to be true because God said, "But as for all of you, those of you who are still present, desiring to approach at this time, Now, especially relevant in this regard is that Karab is in the imperative mood. And that reveals that these people wanted to be part of this harvest. And that means they knew about it. And they coveted it while being excluded from it. They knew about it, they coveted it, and they were excluded from it. As such, this place is a bullseye on the mother goddess conspiratorial clique. There is no rational way to deny the realization that the people Yahowah is denouncing for having fallen under the spell of an Anan, a demonic woman, conjuring false spirits, is directing our attention to the malcontents congregating around Miss Powers, known as D. This cannot represent religious Jews because there are just no ingatherings of souls associated with Judaism anywhere on the calendar, much less on Shabuwah. So they're not going to be anticipating the harvest. They're not going to be wondering why they were not taken and concerned because this was something they wanted to participate in. It cannot represent religious Jews or any cultural Jew. Furthermore, it can't be Christians either. Why? Because their rapture is on Towrah, on trumpets. Misled by Peter and Paul, Christians believe that Shabuwah was fulfilled as Pentecost with the birth of their church. And in addition, Paul claimed that the rapture would occur on trumpets. Uh-oh. Having eliminated religious Jews and faithful Christians from the mix, we also know that this despised clique of Zana, of the despised whore, can neither be numerous nor have a significant audience. Why? Because this repudiation of them, if so, would be in conflict with the previous statements where we learned that relatively few were going to be paying attention. It's just this one little group that knew of it, missed it, and yet wanted to be part of it, but were left behind. Therefore, apart from the irritatingly negative antagonism towards those who will be Asaph withdrawn, this is an otherwise meaningless cast of fools, devoid of understanding, but they placed themselves in the wrong position at the wrong time with the wrong adversary making erroneous claims. That said, we must also confirm the realization that this and what follows isn't just among the longest, it is the longest. It is the most detailed and vitriolic condemnation found anywhere in the Torah and prophets. Therefore, this otherwise irrelevant assemblage of miscreants that have garnered Yahowah's unbridled animosity have done so because of their stated aversion and outright denial of his Ha-Nakar, observant foreigner, and God's plans pursuant to the Shabuwah Katsir. That is why God now hates them with a passion that is unlike anything we have ever read. The whole of Yashayah, Isaiah 56 and 57, leads us with no other logical conclusion other than to surmise that this hideous condemnation is focused on the same psychotic woman previously condemned in the prophecies associated with Chawah, Miriam, and Michal in Genesis 2, Numbers 12, and 2 Samuel 6. DP and her embittered conspiratorialist cult, they alone have claimed Shabuwah as their harvest while writing themselves out of it. While it seems like such an insignificant number of worthless humans, the 24 lost souls operating under the influence of this mother goddess will somehow cause, through their intermixing of truth and deception, upwards of 1,000 Jews to hesitate relative to the harvest, such that their progress is impeded and they are left behind. Yahweh views this not only as unforgivable, but worse, as we shall soon see, damnable. Therefore, the cadre of characterless co-conspirators who will be left behind at this time, while expecting to have been part of the ingathering, are said to be Beni Hanan, children of false pretenses, under the spell of a demonic woman, deliberately conjuring false spirits to obscure reality and to blow smoke. That's really bad. And this does not help. Beni Hanan, you are the offspring of a woman who is intensely committed to pursuing a demonic spirit, to occlude observation through sleight of hand and fortune telling. Folks, Hanan is a sorceress. And so that's worse. In the participle form, Hanan is a derogatory title, depicting someone who is, by God's view, demonic. In the Poel stem, these beguiled by her, rather than being seen as victims of her seduction, well, they're presented as collaborating with her. Under false pretenses, they will willfully and knowingly deceive while trying to obfuscate the truth. This means that they are equally committed to promoting their demonic diatribes as they are to slandering those who have earned the right to participate in the harvest. From this point forward, and inclusive of Hanan, sorceress, indeed, throughout this entire denunciation, with only minor exceptions, every verb is presented in the second person, feminine, singular. And this is all the way through, statement after statement, indictment after indictment, verb after verb, therefore addressing one very nasty woman that Yahweh has already says is Hanan, demonic, that he has said is Zana, a whore. Well, something I have not witnessed previously in 24 years of translating. Clearly, there's no escaping the fact that God hates this woman. The exceptions, well, begin here with Karab, revealing that both men and women have opted of their own free will to anger the Almighty while operating under her spell. Further, we find Naaf revealing that the degenerate woman has a male accomplice, someone who is unfaithful, disloyal, unreliable, and seen as religious. And indeed, well, she does. We'll call DP's cohort David Crud, because he is her chief solicitor and enabler. Without him, the sorceress has no influence. He's the one that actually took down, not once, but twice, the Yahowah site with all of its books freely offered. He put his own agenda and that of this demonic woman that he serves ahead of God. David Crud is therefore the spawn of the Anan, the sorceress, making him Na'af, someone who venerates false gods from the only actual God's perspective. I'm sharing this with you. I am just the messenger. And the lead devotee of the mother's god is called, his goal is to seek lovers for the sorceress, drawing people in to venerate with her. All of his letters, all of his phone calls, that is what they do. That's what he's been doing for over a year now. And the examples are copious. They're undeniable. I've even shared some of them on these programs in the past. With the nakaf, written using the Peel participle, there is no refuting that D. Crud has earned his dubious distinction of being disloyal and unreliable, especially while enabling the Anan, the sorceress, this demonic woman. And that is exactly what we have witnessed. I have letters and other evidence to prove it, including screenshots when he took down the Yahowah site. Now, this brings us to our third successive participle, a verbal noun, a descriptive title, Zana. It means loathed woman. Therefore, in addition to being an Anan, demonic woman, the devil's advocate, the subject of Yahweh's ire is a Zana, a despised whore. She, Zana, panders to her partners for favors and bribes. She is a scorned harlot and a miserable prostitute, feigning adulation and love for money. And that is precisely our experience with this very DP. Now, as we press forward with our evaluation of this prophecy, let's remain grounded within the context of that which has been delivered. And so I am going to, in our next program, take you right back to the beginning of this and run right through to where we are, because I want you to recognize that every statement that Yahowah makes hereafter is specifically directed at them. Well, I view them as insignificant as navel lint. God doesn't. And he is disgusted by them. And ultimately, not only is he going to tell us that he is dispatching them to Sheol, which is hell, but even after he tells us that, he continues to rant. It's never in the entirety of the prophets will you see anything that made God this angry. So congratulations, ladies. You've really dug yourself in this time. We'll return to this topic, one of the most interesting prophecies ever revealed, as we continue our story about returning to the garden, who will and who will not, in another episode of the Yahowah blog. Thank you for listening.